And joining us now is Claire McCaskill, former U.S. Senator from Missouri and an MSNBC analyst. Claire, I'm so happy to have you here tonight to understand what happens in the next 6 days and how you see Democrats managing the message going into a very, very, very consequential midterm election. The first thing I have to ask you is, what did you make of the president's remarks tonight? And were you surprised that he chose this moment to talk about the threats to democracy that we face?
Well, first, it's great to be with you, Alex. I'm excited to be on your show for the first time, and I look forward to visiting with you many times in the future.
Please.
I think Joe Biden gave a speech tonight that he wanted to give. And I'm not sure he spent a lot of time analyzing the timing or the theatrics or the visual. I think he wanted to say something. I think he wanted to grab America by the shirt, shake America and say, please pay attention at this moment. As you guys were just talking about, democracy is a journey. It's not a destination. And what Biden was trying to do tonight is to try to reach some Americans that aren't part of that chunk of the Republican Party that thinks they only believe in elections when they win, but rather the rest of the country, and say, we are dangerously close to losing something that defines our country that we have been very proud of and been pretty good at for most of our history. And it is in trouble. And I really want you to pay attention. It was not a wildly political speech. It was really a speech about American democracy. And I think it showed that he's afraid of what is happening and this illness, this big, huge bump in this road of democracy. I mean, it's like they've torn up the road and now we got to figure out how to get to the other side. And this election may be a bridge that restores our journey on democracy, or it could tear the road up even further.
Claire, I got the sense, the president has spoke to these themes before. He spoke about them last month. He's clearly worried about some of the election deniers who were on the ballot. That's looming in the foreground. But I also got the sense that the attack on Paul Pelosi deeply shook him. Not just because he's known Nancy Pelosi for a very long time, not just because it's the husband of the Speaker of the House, but because it's so much of a piece with what else he sees as plaguing the country, the poison that has spread through its veins. Did you get that sense? Do you think that the Pelosi attack, as the books are written, will be seen as an inflection point in the, in the rise and the expansion of violent political rhetoric that becomes actually just plain old violence in the real world?
Well, I think Joe Biden was deeply troubled by what happened, but he was probably just as troubled by what happened after the attack. The notion that you would have the same chunk of people in our country basically calling the police liars, the police that they purport to support, that the blue line and, that we're the ones that care about law and order and support our police. And they basically called the police liars who responded to a 911 call and intervened in a violent situation, risking their own lives, and arrested a suspect and then legally, after giving him his rights, secured a videotaped confession. And they're basically saying, yeah, no, we don't believe you. No, you're a big liar. So I think it's the reaction of people and the failure of Republican leaders that Joe Biden knows very well. I think he's most disappointed that there wasn't more of a coming together at this moment of Republicans and Democrats in Congress to say no more political violence. I think he's disgusted at how many Republicans are either saying very little, saying horrible things, or just standing silent. I really think that's what it's about.
I just wonder how it's so hard to know who the intended audience for. I think the president was saying it for history, for himself, for the American public. And I wonder if he was trying to speak to a specific slice of the American electorate. We talk about the division in this country. I was talking to Tim Ryan last night, and he's still retains a certain amount of optimism about whether you can, have a Fox News town hall and also appeal to Democratic voters. I know in 2018, you talked to the Fox News audience and felt like that was a necessary part of campaigning. Do you still think that it's possible to be a Democrat in this day and age and talk to the people who are fans of Donald Trump or believe the election, something nefarious went on, and get their votes?
Well, it sure as hell better be. Because if you look at this, Alex, let's look at the country. We probably have 25 to 30% of Americans that are totally in the tank with Donald Trump and his lies and the big lie and the fraud and elections don't count unless we win. But then you have the rest of the country. And if we stay on opposite ends of the room, if our party doesn't try to move and capture the concerns of those people who don't see themselves as a rabid Democrat or a very progressive Democrat, they see themselves as middle of the roaders. I know these people. I represented a whole bunch of them. And when you have swing districts and you have swing states, if we don't have candidates who can speak to that middle, who can try to capture those people and bring them and make a healthy majority where we can compromise and actually solve problems, then we either are going to break apart or we'll end up probably with a third party before it's all said and done, I'm guessing.
I would prefer one of those outcomes over the other, I have to admit.
I would too. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
I want the Democrats to understand something. Everything you're hearing about the Republicans are winning the polls and Republicans are going to win and we're losing in the polls, do not believe it. I have been on both sides of this a week before big elections where the polls said I was going to win and I lost, and the polls said I was going to lose and I won. So please, everyone vote. Do not believe for a minute that we are not in this and that every single vote doesn't matter. It does. The courts held him up last time and they'll hold him up again.
Everyone listen to Claire McCaskill, former U.S. Senator from Missouri, MSNBC analyst, friend of the show. Claire, thanks for your time and wisdom as always.
Thank you, Alex.